Welcome to Outer Space, International Arts and Class Travel Podcast.
On this week's show, Catalonia and the role of art in the struggle. An interview with Paco Márquez Carvajal. In the space station this week, we have guest commentary by Suz Muna and music this week by Senyor Peix, a song called Memòria. Hello, I'm Rob McDonald, the host and presenter of Outer Space Arts and Culture podcast. Today, my guest is Paco Márquez Carvajal. I've said that completely wrong, Paco, haven't I? Anyway, welcome to the show. How are you doing? And can you correct how to say that, please?
Okay, Rob. Hello, everybody. My name is Paco Márquez Carvajal.
Perfect. Well said. You said it exactly right. Okay, so Paco, I know you because you were the elected representative for the CUP party in Catalonia, which is an anti-capitalist left-wing pro-independence party, and you were the regidor, that is for English speakers, the councillor responsible for art and culture for the Malgrat de Mar municipal area. I also know that you've got a background in theatre production and in arts projects in general. So that's who I think you are. Who do you think you are? Oh, is that correct?
It's difficult to say who I am for me. Yes, it's true. I'm councillor man from CUP in Malgrat from 2015 to 2019. But before this, before this, my political structure or my political philosophy was after this, not before this. I was in Mexico, in Chiapas, from 3 years to 2008 until 2011, working in a TV production, but it's an association that works with children on the streets, art projects on the streets with children in Tuxtla Gutiérrez. It's the capital of Chiapas, not San Cristóbal de las Casas, but a lot of people think that it's San Cristóbal, the main city, and it's not true. It's Tuxtla Gutiérrez. And before this, I go to Senegal with Clowns Without Borders. And before this, I was involved in political movements in Malgrat de Mar, my village, my little town. And I think I will, if I can express my signs with signs. I was a child. I have political decisions and political thinkings.
Yeah, motivations.
Sorry, my
no. It's good. So
and my English, it's not very good, and I can try to explain.
I think you were very clear then, and I know you quite well. But I didn't know about the Senegal thing that you did, and I didn't know about the TV for children. Explain the TV for children thing that you did in Mexico a little bit. That sounded interesting.
Yes. we made a program, a TV program, puppets program, like Sesame Street, more or less. And in this little association, they comes TV and says us the public TV from Chiapas come and says we want a TV program for children, and for me it was the best thing I never done. Ever done.
Yeah.
And because we can put our philosophy and political philosophy on this program, and we say we make goals like football.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we put red ribbons in the program. We make scripts very not all political, but with a little political philosophies or ideas.
Okay, interesting. I mean, as I introduce you, you are a member of the CUP, anti-capitalist left-wing party in Catalonia, and we'll come on to that in a little bit. But where did your political philosophy develop? How did you, where did you get your politics from? What inspired your philosophies?
I'm inspired.
And what are they? What are they? And what are they? How do you see the left-wing movement? How do you see socialism? How do you see these ideas?
My philosophy begins with Zapatismo in EZLN, Mexico, in Chiapas, 1994 begins the war. I think you can find in internet a lot of information from this, and this movement impacted me. When I saw on TV these people with I don't know the name in English, pasamontañas,
balaclavas, I think. No?
Yes, and the words that they say. The way how they begin this movement, the dignity of the movement, in a moment that the left don't have people who are who guide this philosophy. And I say that I am Zapatist.
Okay. What does that mean? What does that mean because for many, I mean, obviously this podcast is in English, and if you're from Latin America, you would probably know what that means. And if you're politically active, you might know what that means. But what does that mean to be that for you?
Zapatist comes from Emiliano Zapata. It's a Mexican revolutionary, like Villa in Mexico in the beginnings of the 20th century, and make the revolution and say the fields, it's from who works in the fields.
Okay.
And in Chiapas, never the revolution comes. Never came the revolution in Chiapas. And in Mexico, the problem is with the agriculture. And the Zapatist reclaims this and a lot of things like Cuba Revolution or all the movements in Central America from La Guerrilla. The Zapatism comes from Emiliano Zapata. It's a Mexican revolutionary person from the first 20th century, the first decade, the Mexican Revolution. And he said that el campo es para quien lo trabaja. The field is who works in the field, on the fields. And
so who works in the fields owns the fields, if you like.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And in Chiapas, at southeast from Mexico, it's the border with Guatemala. Never arrived the revolution or these thinkings, and this is the main structure from Zapatismo. But in the middle comes the Cuba Revolution, all the guerrillas from Central America, and it's important thing to say that a religion movement from the left, that is La Teología de la Liberación. It's an important movement in all Central America with this priest from the left. They are communist and say that they are communist.
Okay, it's a bit like the Trotskyist nun from Catalonia. I forget her name, but this religion mixed with revolutionary politics.
Yes, it's in Catalonia was important in Franquismo, with Franco, in all these squares around the Barcelona city or Girona city, and with the working class people, they was very important.
Well, I mean that's a question really to develop. How does sort of agricultural Mexican revolutionary ideas, how does that translate into your views in Catalonia?
Yes,
which is a developed industrial Western society. How does that translate for you? Because obviously, okay, I can see that's your inspiration, and I think many on the left from Latin America and Spanish-speaking places would understand that route. People in England maybe not so much. People in America maybe a bit better, but I'm not sure. But how does that translate? How do you view politics in a Catalan environment?
Because Zapatists have a lot of phrases, famous phrases, and a lot of people don't know from who comes, no? What's the beginning of these phrases? And the first one is act locally and think globally.
Okay.
I translate in Spanish is actúa localmente, piensa globalmente. This is the first one. And for me, this is very important because
Just hold a moment. I think we have a motorbike situation.
Yes, I have a friend.
This is a live show, ladies and gentlemen. This is the kind of problems that we have.
Into my laboratory.
Anyway, sorry. Continue.
Yes, and this phrase reflects that we have the main structure. It's in the base. It's the base. It's the important thing. If you change your own village, you can change the world because you are changing these people, these structures, and if every city changes, the world change. But not. It's important to change the state government. It's important change first you, and then change your first reality. That it's your village, it's your square, it's the people who are around you. If you change this, you can change everything.
So basically, build the movement where you are. Would you say that has kind of an anarchistical quality to it in terms of its outlook? Would you class yourself there, or would you think it's different? Because I think it's an interesting discussion, because there's a lot of socialists who aren't anarchists who say, yes, you must build your local base, and link up with all the other areas. But there's also this sort of the more individualist, change yourself, build in your local area and then think internationally. Would you say it was an anarchist type philosophy that you have with this Mexican mix? Would that be fair?
Mexico, it's a very surrealist country.
Okay.
And it's a mix from anarchist and communism. But
anarcho-communist then.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. But it's important to think that we can express our ideas, but if we don't, we are not examples from our ideas, we can change. It's only it's information. It's that empty words.
Yes.
You have to act like you are, and then people see you and says, "Oh, it's possible because this person changed this, because he's changing this."
So yeah, by example. Okay, so that's your artistic background a little bit mixed with your political philosophy, and for me, what I want to talk about is the movement that happened in Catalonia, mainly around the time when you were an elected representative yourself. And it was, I would call it an uprising in Catalonia around the question of independence. But for me, it was much more complex than that. Obviously, I live in Catalonia, for people listening who don't realize that. But I'm English. But it was an independence movement that was also mixed with the social questions, and there was also social movements taking place on a big scale. So people might have seen, in 2017, the election on October the 1st, and that went across the world. What they may not have really realized was the 5, 6, 7 years before that, when there was basically going from a period of not much activity in social movements to what amounted to a huge explosion of massive general strikes across the whole of the Spanish state. Catalonia, particularly, CUP, the party you're a member of, grew very quickly in similar sense to how Podemos grew. Lots of people know about that. So first of all, I want to get a flavour of what you think about that movement, that period, which we're still in some respects, but it's changed. Give me a bit of a political grasp of that, what your view of it is, and then afterwards, I want us to touch a little bit on how art and culture was affected by that. But first of all, give me a flavour of your views of that sort of 5, 6, 7 year period.
I think people was very people are on top of his dignity like a country, because I remember when our laws we can change with the Spanish state, and in what moment they say no, the constitutional the Constitutional Tribunal says no, and they begin to cut and recut and cut this.
That was in just for listeners' sake, so we paint a bit of a picture. That was in like 2006, wasn't it? 2007,
more or
when
less.
There was a constitutional agreement that was basically developed through transition from fascism to normal capitalism, and then there was this constitutional agreement which was basically cut up by the Pepe. In 2006, 2007, I think I'm right in
more
saying
or less,
that, yeah?
it's in this time in the 2012. We have the final sentence from the Constitutional Tribunal, and I don't know, 2011, because I arrived from Mexico and was the first strike from 11 September, that in a lot of time we have 1 million persons
Again, just to explain to the listener, the 11th of September is like a Catalan National Day, and this is a symbolic day for big demonstrations, but they really exploded from the one you're talking about.
Yeah, and this was the first 1 million persons in Barcelona streets reclaim the independence. We don't want a new order, new laws. We want independence, because with the Spanish state we don't have anything to discuss, because we tried to discuss from 10 years and in this process, and they don't hear us, and they cut us, because a lot of people, and this is the beginning. If you add the economical crisis in Spanish in the 50th M, el 15M, it's a good moment to with social objectives and state objectives.
Yeah,
and this is a good moment for us to change. And we want, like CUP, I don't know. I know the others, like the right political party from Catalonia, PDeCAT, Convergència, Junts per Catalunya. We don't know the name, the real name but we know that they are the right party.
Yeah. The representative of capitalist ideology in Catalonia, I think, for the international listener to understand that they've got various names at the moment. They can't quite decide who they are. And
we continue. Have a socialist party, Esquerra Republicana. It's in the middle. It's socialist in the new philosophy of the social democracy.
Yeah, it's a kind of, I don't know, for an English listener, it's like Labour Party of a Catalan origin. There are some nominal socialists in it. There are some good people, but always they back capitalism. That's more or less how they are, yeah.
And after the 15M, a lot of people, young people, basically, they saw what happens here in Catalonia, in Spain, on the world, and was interesting because Barcelona is a very revolutionary city. It's La Rosa dels Focs, no? It's an anarchist city. It's a lot of squat houses, and it's from global movements are a very important city. And we retake these ideas from social globalization, and the CUP was the first time it's a political party that we are in our main force is in the councils, not in the parliament from Catalonia, and we decide to go to the parliament. And we have three persons, three very important persons for us, because they were our boys from all the country, that David Fernandez, Quim Arrufat, and Isabel Vallet. And Quim Fernandez was very important because David is a journalist with a very important discourse, very structured, and a lot of people say, oh, these young people, it's intelligent. Oh, these young people have good ideas. Oh, these young people are very fighters. And we begin to grow up. And CUP begins to grow, and in the elections to the councils, we have two times we multiplicar.
You doubled.
We double our councils we enter in the main cities from Catalonia, we stay there.
Yeah.
And then in 2050, we take 11 persons in the parliament from Catalonia.
Mm-hmm.
It
So
was
I think
very important.
Yeah, and I think this is, I mean, just to recap some of that. So we have this mass movements that developed around the national question. We had the mass movements that developed around social questions. There was the PA, there was different, which is people losing their houses. There was the economic crisis. There was the growth across the whole of the Spanish state from the 15 movements of Podemos. And here you're talking in Catalonia, a big growth of a radical left party, and getting elected to national parliaments. So this, I mean, we could go into that in another podcast because it'd be good to develop what happened. But for the purposes of this podcast, is I want to explore, okay, so that was the situation that developed. There was a growth of a new left party. There was the growth of big social movements, mass demonstrations. I mean, I remember talking to friends in England saying, yes, just another 100,000 on the streets this week in Barcelona. It was every week for a number of years. And there was a big battle of ideas and a huge raising in consciousness as well, I think. Not absolutely understanding the role of capitalism, but there was definitely a change in the dynamic, the human dynamic, and I think everybody experienced it would know that. How do you think that affected arts and culture? Where does that fit in this movement? Is there a particular development alongside it, or was it infected by this movement? How does the arts and culture question mix with this political dynamic?
Okay, I think in Catalonia, I don't know in other countries, maybe in Chiapas I know how it is, but here we have the official culture and we have the no official culture. And on the no official culture, it begins to grow. But what happens? It begins to grow maybe in squat houses or in a little festivals. But if now I come from a course from Teatro del Oprimido from Augusto Boal in Barcelona this last weekend, and we have discussions about how the left have to communicate and it's important.
So this is a theatre production collective.
Yes, it's a political theatre movement. It's called in Teatro del Oprimido. It begins in Brazil from Augusto Boal with the people without fields, like in Mexico.
The landless movement, yeah?
Yes. It begins in the 60s, in the 70s, from the last century. And we have a course here in Barcelona for the Teatre Forn Patutom in the Raval. It's the Raval. It's a square it's un barrio from Barcelona. Very important because a lot of immigration, and all the people who take this course, it's involved in political movement, social movement, education movement, and we discuss about how culture can involve in movements. But we have a problem because sometimes we think like the ancients, like if Marx or Bakunin was live, and not it's true. We have to adapt in the new medias. And the new media, it's not the enemy. Maybe the enemy is the people who are moving these medias. And for example, the fascism, it's very important in the new medias because they are, I don't know the name in English, but in Spanish, it's blanquear a la extrema derecha. It's whitening the
It's like a whitening out, I suppose, of the extreme right. I guess that means a blanket covering.
Yes,
maybe it's probably the word.
And we don't have the for example, little example like Picasso. Picasso was everybody knows who is Picasso. And Picasso was very important from the Communist Party in Spain, because a lot of money comes from Picasso with the political movements with Franco, in the opposition with Franco. And we don't have this now. And we need to take this. We need this way to impact to the people, because the only communication it's from the fascism. Sorry, I have.
That's okay. These are good sounds coming from an art workshop.
It's a work.
It's a class struggle and arts podcast. So being in a real workshop with real noises, I think we can handle it. And as long as it doesn't continue. So sorry, carry on, Paco. So you're talking about the discussions that are taking place on the artistic left in Barcelona at the moment. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Continue.
For example, for me, it's very interesting the street art. Maybe this I think it's from UK. I think Banksy is a good reference from, I don't know if from the left, but it's important the way of his the things that he produced. I have in my brain the moment that in an important casa de subastas, like I don't know the name in English, subasta, when you want to buy a painting and everybody says
art galleries,
art gallery, and in the moment with he buys the painting begins to broken.
Yeah, this is an interesting point. I mean, I saw that, and we diverged a little bit, and I was like, okay, cool, you made your point, but actually he made millions out of it. Which is actually a sign of decadent capitalism. Interestingly enough, on Banksy's defense, he has recently, put some money into a ship that's trying to help immigrants in the Mediterranean. And I think, as for artists, he is English. He's from sort of the Bristol area of England. He's a good reference point. But I think it's very much he does interesting work that does communicate. But how do you think, I mean, it's maybe a point I would want to develop, how do you think that artists themselves need to organize, because Banksy's a good reference point to how we should be doing art, maybe, but how do you think artists should organize alongside the movement?
It's difficult to say, because artists have every artist have his own ego, no, and and to decide the way of how we are a collective, it's difficult. But maybe it's interesting to think reference, because I think the artist, it's like a terrorist. You may say it's a collective in terrorism, or you can be an solitary wolf, un lobo solitario.
Yeah, a lone wolf. Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
and the two things are interesting. Maybe the interesting thing is to go from one way to the other way, and this is interesting. And for example, in Mexico, Zapatism in the cities in Zapatist territory, they have a meeting every 2 years with an international artist and local artist and it's a meeting to discuss, for example, this.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. I mean, one of the driving forces for me to put this podcast together is this question that we're finishing on. You know, is this idea of what the workers' movement is one very important thing. And for me and for you and for artists, the artist movement is very important. How do you bring those together? And the fact that you talk about the lone wolf, the individualistic attitude of some artists, you know, and that's linked to theoretical questions about the means of production and how they relate to it and these kind of questions. And then there's this thing you mentioned in Mexico, which I find interesting, and maybe we'll get you back to talk more on that, because the idea of an artist international, the reference point, and you use that word reference point, that looks towards the workers' movement, for me, is the critical thing. You talked about Picasso and his connections with the Communist Party. You know, these reference points are important, you know, whether they be parties or movements or structures and the rest of it. So maybe just to see us out, just explain this thing in Mexico that you talked about. What do they do? How does it work? You know, can you buy a ticket, or do you have to get a plane and just turn up? You know,
now I don't know how is the situation, because it's very difficult with the COVID situation. But it's interesting because it's. I think it's important that we can find in one point of the world everybody. And another thing for me it's important, it's Europe, it's finish. And Latin America, it's beginning.
Okay.
And Africa, it's more beginning. And we have to take this reference for us, because here our references are empty now. For me.
Yeah, no, but I mean, culturally, you could argue that a lot is dead, but out of death comes rebirth. You know, and this is one of the interesting things that actually.
The blood from Latin America is very important here.
Yeah.
We have to see what happens there. For example, in Brazil, there are big movement from theater. This theater of oppressives, or del oprimido, Teatro del Oprimido. It's a school, and it's a political movement, art movement, theater political movement. And it's in Brazil, it's in Uruguay, it's in Argentina, it's in these countries. We don't have here references. I don't know the references. Maybe I think. No. I think. Well, if they're there, they're not big enough, because if you don't see them and I don't see them, I mean, one of the I don't know if inspiration's the right word. One of the things I really want from this podcast is to bring as much as possible to an English language audience the movements that are developing all over the world, but particularly Latin America, you know, because there's a lot of history with art and politics there, and there's a lot of lack of understanding in Northern Europe, particularly in Britain, where I'm from, about how art and politics live together. You know, so anyway, on that, Paco, why don't we close it for today, and then maybe we'll come back to you and we'll develop some of these points that we've touched on today in more detail. What do you reckon? Yeah, okay, for me that's good. The second parts maybe are better than the first ones.
Okay then, Paco, you take good care now, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye now.
Bye.
Okay then, so let's go up to the space station, where this week we have Suz Muna. How you doing, Suz? You okay?
Hello there. Yes.
Well, welcome.
I'm fine, thank you.
Welcome to the space station. Just for regular listeners, we're not having Paul this week. We've sent him on a mission We've heard that there's a new life form on Venus, and Paul has gone to check out the arts and culture and report back to us next week. So we've got a guest this week in Suz Muna. We did an interview with you in the first series on your art and stuff. So we've invited you back to the space station. I hope Paul's left it reasonably clean up there.
I'm just worried about the masking tape on his spacesuit, about whether that, that I'm just hoping that holds for the whole of his mission.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure how much air he actually needs, but he certainly has enough for the rest of us. So, okay, so back to the interview with Paco. What was your thoughts, Suz? What do you think?
I like the interview. Certainly really interesting hearing about what's happening in that part of the world. I mean, like lots of other parts of the world, there seems to be a lot going on politically. One of the really interesting questions I think he touched on, but you didn't really, as with all of these things, you never get to explore everything in the fullest. But you were touching on the question of what is the role of art in a period of upheaval like that, the ones that he was describing. And some of the stuff sounded I'd never heard about Clowns Without Borders. I mean, what a brilliant idea. There's clearly he's doing some really fantastic work. But I thought it would be really interesting to explore that question a bit more.
I mean, we are going to get Paco back, because as we were doing the interview, you're dead right. Good. As we were doing the interview, first of all, he was interested in himself, and it's always good to find out about the person. Then we started talking about the struggle in Catalonia, and there's so much to say there, and by the time we got there, we were only able to touch the surface, but we can develop it a little here, I think. So yeah. So what were you thinking about in terms of, art in the moments of upheaval? Because I was obviously involved in all that and saw many artists in the struggle at the time, So what sort of points did you think of?
Well, because I was thinking about it afterwards. I mean, it was one of those lovely interviews where you go over things quite a lot afterwards, it sort of comes back to you. And I was thinking, there isn't one role. I mean, first of all, you've got to think the other side are using art, aren't they? Whoever your enemy is, they're using art, and they're using it in the same way, in a way. They're using it as propaganda, the visual images or theatre or anything like that. Whatever form of art it is, the other side is using, the 1% are using it as well. Yes. And we've got to be able to use it and to match that and to give our own narrative in the same way that they are doing, except obviously it would be a very different narrative. So there are lots and lots of different roles. I mean, there's the kind of propagandist role, and obviously the role that it plays is going to depend on what form the art is. So I was thinking, in terms of visual art, if you think about something like even the BLM, protest, the Black Lives Matter, yes. That swept across the world, and one of the things that so many of them did was to use an image of George Floyd, didn't they? It became a visual representation.
There was one in Berlin. Yeah. It was all over the world.
Yeah. With that one, I mean, they weren't all the same painting of him or photograph of him, but he became that image of George Floyd, that one picture of him became a symbol for all of the victims of that kind of discrimination. So it can play this role of having like a unifying role to as a banner, one image with no words even can play a role of being a rallying point, can't it, for everybody involved in that struggle, everyone who wants to be identified in that struggle. And there were badges and all sorts of things. So one of the roles is clearly the kind of sort of organizing tool that makes it an organizing tool. But if you're doing theatre, as Paco was talking about, sort of the role of theatre, that can play a more analytical role, can't it? And if you think about writings like The Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck, which is, I absolutely loved that book. I only read it quite recently, actually, but I absolutely loved it. And it's just such a brilliant way of talking about socialism, about what kind of society socialism will be, what are all the problems. But it's not done in a crude way. It's done in a really clever way. And you can really explore that in a lot more depth and open people's eyes using that form of art.
I think there's I mean, the whole theatre thing, in this series 2 of the podcast, we've talked a lot about theatre, and I'm quite excited about it because I've never done theatre, but always fancied my chances, if I could remember my lines. So, but interesting enough, in those movements that we were talking about with the Catalan independence, it was a very powerful movement because of its mix with the social, economic, and the national question all at one time. And it was a revolutionary moment, and I haven't been in that many in my life, and I was in one. And going to those demonstrations, which were week on week for a good 6 weeks, huge demonstrations, lots of power in them. And I saw 2 really interesting artistic things. And one of them was live theatre in the middle of the demonstration.
Yeah.
There was the people selling the papers and giving out their leaflets and the chanting and the megaphoning and all the sort of normal things. And there was this crazy theatre group, and they were doing a story about the struggle, and they were tying in all these social questions, and it was quite bizarre, so that was one thing about how art, not only as a propaganda tool, which is an interesting question in of itself, but also within the struggle itself, it performs this cultural role live. The other thing I would say as well that was really interesting about the Catalan independence stuff that we didn't really get onto with Paco was there's this thing called Castellas, which is human pyramids that they do in Catalonia. It's a very cultural thing, very important cultural thing actually, because it's about the whole community coming together, and they do a tower and they put the child on the top. And if you've ever seen it, it's quite stunning. And what was interesting, in the middle of the demonstrations, they did it because it's very Catalan. It's not done in other areas of the Spanish states. And so one of the fantastic things of this was this cultural mix of people getting on top of each other's shoulders and putting a flag so high up that the state couldn't take it down. I mean, these were just 2 little side things, but these are good indicators about how art interacts with the struggle in a live way, to my personal experiences.
And it's building it, it's building it because you can think of artists, especially visual artists, who maybe or even writers actually, who do representation songs and things like that about a period of struggle, and that creates kind of a historical memory of it. It reflects what happens at the time. It describes how people felt at the time in various different different media, showing how people felt at the time. But it does more than that. It can change the way people think about things by think about the role of satire. Satire in all its different forms, whether it's spitting image puppets or Gilray and people like that were really famous for their satirical drawings. The role of satire can make people think differently about something, can maybe highlight a hypocrisy that they hadn't seen before, and it can actually change the way that people think. So it's doing more than just being a mirror, isn't it? It's doing more than just reflecting what people are saying.
It's a really important point, because I think some criticisms could be made of how people like us would see art as, and people say, oh, well, it's just a reflection. It's just a reflection of the movement. And this is a very sort of undialectical way of understanding the role of art in the struggle, because for me, it's the examples I gave, it's very much intertwined. Yes, there is a reflection. So I a personal example again. During that moment, I made a bust of Lenin, and I thought, well, and I wrote on it in Catalan, I voted. Now the thing is, why was that? Oh, okay, why was that important? It was important because the Communist Party were from the Spanish state, didn't support this independence movement, but they did quote Lenin on the national question, even in statewide TV and this kind of stuff, and in interviews. It was appalling. It was appalling, and so. That was just a reflection. That was a reflection of something that happened. But I think there's something deeper, isn't there? And I think it's one of the reasons why we talk on this podcast, that people have got to grasp that art isn't just this sort of a mirror. It's not just a mirror. It's actually both sides of the mirror. It works in a multi-dimensional way. At least that's my
it's contributing.
my take.
Yeah, and I think because it's very hard to measure it. I mean, where it's measured is really probably in marketing. They know exactly how an image might change the way that somebody, shops, their shopping habits. They know the power of those things, and they do measure it very, very scientifically. I mean, there's huge amounts of research done. So, in that area, but probably in the kind of things that we're involved in, there's no one measuring it and saying, "Oh, that's the difference that it made because this person saw this image or read this book." The fiction, maybe not a pamphlet, but read this kind of fiction. It made them start thinking in a different way, and therefore they went out and voted in a different way. Who's measuring that? Mm-hmm. So it's really easy to overlook the impact that it has because there's nothing to say this is, and so you can just not see it. You can just not think that it's there, and you can fall back on that idea that actually it's just reflecting. It's just a mirror of what's doing, but it's not. It is contributing. I think it does contribute.
I mean, you said two things there that really rang a little bell with me because you used the word propaganda and marketing, and I think that's very interesting because I think when people say propaganda, they immediately freak out, and quite rightly, actually, because it's a form used to change people's minds. Now, for socialist activists, they might use the word propaganda very loosely, like, oh, it's just our propaganda. But actually, Joe Public, if that's the right expression these days, would maybe think that propaganda was an evil thing, and marketing, well, that is quite subversive.
Yeah.
And the two things are actually interconnected, and the thing is about how does the left understand art, not as an aesthetic, but as a form, as part of the integral part of the struggle, and I think this is one of the things that the left needs to grasp, because if we don't understand its power, we just use it as let's have a nice logo. Let's get an artist in. It's important. It's not a secondary thing, but it's not really the key thing because I think artistry can express itself in lots of ways in the political movement.
Yeah. I think that is a good point. And I think, the other side of it for me, which I hadn't really appreciated until I really started thinking about that question, in a bit more depth, was around you actually need those creative thinkers in any kind of campaigning that you're doing, and any, not just to kind of design the banners, but they're bringing even in on the question of tactics, on the question of communication, all of those other questions. They are bringing a creative thinking, and you need those kind of people, just as you need people who think in what might be a sort of much more logical way, if you like. You want some people who can just see an opportunity where maybe other people wouldn't see it, or just think about something from a completely different perspective.
Well, so, I think that really. Sorry, so just rang another little bell. You're ringing lots of bells today, because a couple of years later, with what was a protest called the Tsunami Protest, which is when they jailed the political prisoners, which was a follow-on that took place here, and how that movement developed was explosively creative, and it was organized a bit like the stuff that was organized recently against Trump on TikTok to fuck up his rally.
Oh yeah.
In the same ways, I think they used a different social media. I think they used the Telegraph one to organize those protests, and it was organized sort of under the radar of the state, incredibly creative way of doing it. And it reminded, and we're a little bit older, it reminded me of the miners' strike in Britain in the 80s, where they used to know their phones were tapped. So they used to talk to each other and say, we're going to do a mass picket down at this colliery this week, knowing that the police were listening. And then they wouldn't use the phone to actually organise where the mass picket would be, this is creative. This is how we're going to change the world. We're going to use this creativity.
I'm going to throw in an example of my own. Yeah,
go on. Yeah, go.
Yeah. Well, one that we had recently was because we're in lockdown and it's really hard, and people, you can't kind of mass leaflet people in the way that you used to be able to. And we were looking at a tactic for a protest that we were organising, and someone mentioned about this clean graffiti. Have you come across that?
No, clean
graffiti.
No, explain.
And what that is they get like a rubber mat and make a template out of it. They lay it on the pavement and they jet wash, so that your message comes up as a clean bit on the pavement. It is absolutely legal because they're not even using any chemicals. They are literally just cleaning. And the brilliant thing about it in a period of lockdown is that it lasts about a month.
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
People. So maybe if you were gonna leaflet 100 people at a protest, say 100 of them would take a leaflet. 100 people over a period of a month will notice that on the pavement. And that is something completely new. I mean, that's only been a recent form of kind of, we couldn't go and graffiti somewhere. We would get charged for, graffiti.
Yeah, you can't be
so
charged
it's so
for doing the cleaning the council should have been doing anyway.
Exactly. Or
clean
on the
it
wall
off,
of,
will you?
The wall of,
That's a little bit like, like you see kids right in the back of the car, clean me, don't you? It's a bit.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it just takes that. What a brilliant jump. That was a creative thinker who thought up this new way of doing it, which offers us a new way of actually getting our message over to people. And of course, we going to use lots of sort of puns on clean up your act and things like that, for the landlords that we're targeting. So, I mean, it is, you need those people. You need people who are good at coming up with those kind of ideas and just developing new things to move things forward.
Wow,
and I think it is really good. And so that's part of the role. And I think that is massively underestimated, and I don't want to talk us into being victims or something, but I do really think that it's not, and again, maybe it's kind of a lot of people on the left are maybe quite serious about things. They're not trivial people generally. Left activists, they can be very serious.
Well, they can be serious and they can be heavily boring.
Yes, I
can hear Jonas,
the other ones, not us.
I can hear Jonas turning up the volume on us. Our time is up.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, that was a brilliant last example. What was it called again? Clean graffiti. I love it.
It's clean graffiti, yeah.
That's brilliant. Well, listen, Suz, thanks very much for stepping in while Paul was on his way to Venus, and we're going to get you back in the show, do some more guest stuff, and be involved in general. So you take good care now, and we'll see you again soon. Okay?
You too. Safe trip.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you, Paco, for being our guest this week and talking about the struggle in Catalonia. And thank you, Suz, for being on this week's Space Station. If you like what we are doing and would like to support the show, then please consider donating through our website. I will now leave you with a song called Memòria by El Senyor Peix. Enjoy!
Hivern del 36, un cop de porta i un fort crit marcant el meu destí. Potser no saps ni com em dic, tot i que en tinc 95, i t'explico aquesta història perquè no es perdi en l'oblit. Sentiments dins del meu cor, una història d'amor que deixo enrere per un temps. Per la lluita popular, paraules de complicitat, no sé si estic preparat. I d'aquell temps no oblidarem la lluita per la revolució antifeixista i mantindrem ben viva la memòria per molt que ens vulguin silenciar. Sota el cel de Barcelona el sol es va apagant rere l'ombra de la mort. Sembla ser que en tinc per anys, que la guerra ha començat i la memòria em fa reviure aquells anys de pors i esclats. Em floreix un sentiment de ràbia i dolor, un trist somriure d'amargor. Tanco els ulls i encara veig antics companys que van caient, un vell record queda latent. I d'aquell temps no oblidarem la lluita per la revolució antifeixista i mantindré ben viva la memòria per molt que ens vulguin silenciar. I en aquest temps més que mai ho tindrem present, que el seu somni es transformi en la revolta. I seguiré les passes dels qui un dia van morir per la llibertat. Visca la terra!
We hope you enjoyed the show. If you have something to say to us, then join our Facebook group or contact us at outaspace.com. That's outa-space.com. See you soon!